Continuing with Dorrie and the play. The princess is walking in the royal garden. She is picking flowers. Gink the Great is following her, but the princess does not know it. The poor princess does not know that Gink the Great is about to be wicked and cast a spell over her. Dorrie walked back and forth and leaned down every few steps, pretending to pick flowers from the carpet. She had to be careful the crown did not fall off. And there is Gink the Great. Gink smelled the sardines in Dorrie's pocket. Gink followed Dorrie back and forth, back and forth. Gink stepped on his magician's cloak and stumbled. He got all tangled up. Dorrie stopped picking flowers. Gink the Great has just cast a wicked spell over the poor princess, said Dorrie. It was such a bad spell, he got tangled up in his cloak. We don't really get to see Gink tangled unless it's on the next page. No, it doesn't look like it. Dorrie reached under her robes and got another sardine from her pocket. Gink got untangled and stood on his hind legs, waiting for the sardine. Gink the Great is looking to see if his wicked spell is going to work, explained Dorrie. Now he is going to run away so nobody will know he did it, and Dorrie tossed the sardine behind the curtains, and Gink ran to get it. And there she is holding the sardine, and I believe that is the cover picture for the book. That is the end of Act 1, Dorrie said. Dorrie closed the curtains. She took the cloak and mitten off Gink. Dorrie tucked a sardine into the rim of her crown. She opened the curtains again, closed her eyes, and stretched out on the carpet. Dorrie opened one eye. 100 years have passed. A handsome prince, Prince Gink, is galloping through the forest to save the princess. He'll be here in a minute. Gink came out from behind the curtains. He sniffed, and came closer and closer to Dorrie. He sniffed Dorrie's hand, and he sniffed the crown. He knocked the crown off and ate the sardine. There he is. Dorrie stood up. She made a curtsy. Thank you, Prince Gink. You have saved me from the spell of the wicked magician. Now we can live happily ever after. Dorrie went behind the curtains. The big witch and cook clapped and clapped. The big witch was smiling. That was a lovely play, Dorrie, said the big witch. I feel much better. How did you get Gink to go back and forth like that? Asked Cook. Dorrie looked up at Cook and smiled. Sardines, said Dorrie. That was the secret in the refrigerator. And there are Cook and the big witch clapping. Let's look at Dorrie and Gink again. Oh, said Cook. Maybe you better have your bath before supper. Dorrie took her bath, and Gink sat on the window-sill and licked his paws and washed his face. There's Dorrie in the bath. What a cool bathtub. And you can just make out Gink up there on the windowsill. Dorrie put on a clean dress and went downstairs to the kitchen, and Gink went with her. Dorrie was just finishing her supper, and Cook was washing the dishes when the kitchen door opened suddenly. It was the big witch. Cook dropped a kettle. Oh, my, said Dorrie in a small voice. What happened to my costume? Said the big witch. Look at it, just look. Oh, my, said Dorrie. Oh, no, wailed Cook. Why didn't I look at the cloth before I cut it? I'm sorry, Mother, said Dorrie. It just looked like a funny old dress. Now, when I saw this picture, I was looking at it, and she looks almost like a witch version of a flapper from the 1920s. But I guess that in the 60s, when this book came out, that was not a cool look to have. But I think the big witch looks pretty cool. The big witch and Cook and Dorrie thought and thought. Dorrie looked at her mother. Mother, said Dorrie, you could go to the fancy ball dress as a little witch. The big witch looked at Dorrie. That's it! Cook looked at Dorrie. Of course! Dorrie took the stuffing out of the big witch's hat so it would fall over sideways like Dorrie's hat. And Dorrie brought the big witch a pair of socks that didn't match and a nightgown. And there's Cook sewing and Dorrie getting stuff, and it looks like the big witch is behind a changing screen taking off her crown. The doorbell rang. I'm almost ready, said the big witch. Tell everyone I'll be right there. Dorrie opened the door. Oh, my, said Dorrie. You all look wonderful. Mother will be along in a minute. And there's Dorrie and Gink opening the door. Mr. Obbs was dressed as a pincushion. Squig was dressed as an umbrella. Dinger was dressed as an ice cream cone. Miss Dorp was dressed as a queen. So this must be Miss Dorp. Same shoes as the big witch had on, too. "Why, I thought you were going to dress as a queen, too," cried Miss Dorp. The big witch smiled. "I changed my mind. It was changed by mistake, but I like this better." "Oh, it is the best costume I have ever seen," said Mr. Obbs. "I like elves." And there's the big witch in her little witch costume. "I like elves better than pincushions," said Squig. "I like elves better than umbrellas," said Dinger. "I like queens with lots of ruffles and beads and lace," said Miss Dorp crossly. And with that, they all called good night to Dorrie and Cook and went off to the ball. Dorrie and Cook waved to them from the doorway. And there's Dorrie and Cook waving, and everybody is flying away into the night in a carriage pulled by broomsticks. "Well," said Cook, "your play had a happy ending after all, even if people can't tell the difference between a little witch and an elf." "I suppose it's hard to tell sometimes," said Dorrie, "and I'm sorry I bothered you when you were busy." Cook smiled. "I am always busy. Sometimes I am busy being busy, and now it is time for you to go to bed." And there's Cook with her rag and Dorrie and Gink going upstairs to bed. Dorrie climbed up the stairs and Gink went with her. In a few minutes she was sound asleep under the covers. Gink curled up on her socks on the floor beside the bed. Where's Gink? I missed him. Oh, there he is. The clock in the hall struck midnight. There's the big witch. The big witch came home and tiptoed up the stairs to Dorrie's room. The big witch was smiling. Dorrie sat up. "Oh, Mother," said Dorrie, "did you win?" The big witch laughed. "Mr. Obbs and I both won. All Mr. Obbs' pins fell out, and he won first prize as a tomato, and I won first prize as an elf." "I'm glad," said Dorrie. "Me too," said the big witch. And there they are, mother and daughter, in similar outfits. Dorrie fell asleep again with a big smile on her face. And so did the big witch. And so did Mr. Obbs. The end.